am Regular Man.
Alright, man. You're welcome. This is the Black Licks for Regular Man, and I'm here with my buddy Nathan. I'm gonna talk a little bit about what it means to be a libertarian, and a few other things as well.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, man. No, thank you for coming on, man. Well, first of all, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. My name's Nathan. I have lived in the Midwest my whole life. Didn't have much interest in politics beginning of my life. I had to do a report on Jack London in high school, and that made me believe I was a socialist. So I went a year or so thinking I was a full-on socialist, got a minimum wage job, and realized that I was not a socialist because the people around me were not putting in what I was, and we were all getting the same. Like, that's not how this works. It's based on what you give, and you get what you give, and that's the way it should be. So I kind of still wasn't interested in politics, but I changed my views a little bit there. I didn't really know I was a libertarian until 6 years ago or so, probably. Wasn't a word for it in my head, but I found myself confused by the two-party system and not really caring one way or the other, but having strong opinions still. And eventually I just kind of started learning more about it, reading more about it, and developed my current mindset and realized I was a libertarian. I refer to myself as a small L libertarian. I'm not part of the party or anything. So it's more of a mindset, principles, than necessarily a strict way of voting. I think it's more about how, and I think most people do hold these principles. These principles are fairly baseline principles if you talk to people on a one-on-one basis. But when it starts to get to a collectivist standpoint, they kind of turn back to their old party ideals. And I now know I had to vote this way. This is how I've always voted. That's how they've always voted. It's more about what they've always done, more so than what they believe. But if you speak with people, you can usually kind of talk with them and like, yeah, that's a libertarian ideal. What you're talking about is libertarianism, and it's hard to get through to people if you refer to the collective. But if you talk to them one-on-one, it's a lot easier, I think. So I appreciate doing that more so.
Cool. And that's kind of like what I've been thinking as well. I think my views, because like you said, you kind of you morphed and you evolved from where you were to where you are now. And I think when Trump came along, that's when I started to really understand like where I was politically, because people were really trying to, they were having these really strict delineations, and I'm thinking to myself like, okay, at first when I first heard Trump was running, I wasn't really on any side, man. I really didn't understand. So I started having conversations with different people. And these were people that were black, that had more conservative values. And as I talked to like my dad and some of my more conservative friends, I started to understand that, hey, wait, like the Democrats really don't hold any of my values, and they're more so, a lot of the things that they were doing were just pissing me off. Like all these things about safe spaces and all the different genders. This stuff just made me realize like they're going off the deep end. Somebody's really crazy. So I really started examining what it really meant to be a true conservative. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, if you look as being black in America, most blacks have really conservative values. People don't really understand that until they start examining them. Like you said, like most regular people have a lot of libertarian values.
Right.
And matter of fact, what do you what's one of those values that you believe is baseline for everybody in America?
If you talk to most people, I think individualism and the concept of objectivism, not necessarily the Ayn Rand objectivism, but like the concept of you're able to think for yourself. Like most people will agree with you, like, oh no, I can make my own decisions. I know, I made some bad ones, some good ones, but when you start getting deeper than that, they start to fall off into the more collectivist regime of, well, I mean, but for the good of everyone, and then they fail to kind of carry over their own individualism to others. They don't grant the autonomy to the other individuals around them. But when you talk to them about it on a one-on-one, they're fine with it. Like, oh yeah, no, I can make my own decisions. Some are good, some are bad, and they're fine with that. So I think that's the individualism in general. You'd be hard pressed to find left, right, center, far left, far right people that aren't willing to grant the concept of individualism. It's tricky because some people, it's nuanced as well. I mean, I know it's nuanced as well, but people are generally willing to grant that part unless you get to the larger group, and that's where they kind of fall off of that mindset of what I know what's best for me, you know what's best for you, and that's as you said, the general, like the more conservative values that you might hold. You can have moral conservative values and still grant the other individuals to make their own choices, even if you view them as immoral. That's core libertarianism. Like, I don't want to necessarily grant that they have to follow my values simply because I grew up or I've come to terms with knowing that my values are correct. If you're not hurting anybody, like that's it. And the NAP, the non-aggression principle, you don't hurt another individual. You can have your life how you want to have it. So you can still hold those strong conservative views on whatever tiny social policy that whichever party is pushing at the time. You can agree and disagree with it all you want, but it's not, the bigger picture is, why is the government the one that's mandating this? Why are they saying these things? That's not their role. And even if, and like a minarchist type government where it's there's still a state, even then, you can really only grant a moral and ethical rule of the state to control up to protecting individuals' life, liberty, property. Beyond that, the state has no role. Like, there's no, why do you get to dictate? Why is the state even involved in marriage? Like, you can be against gay marriage if you want, but who the state has nothing to do with that. Who cares? What does it matter what the president, the governor, who cares what they think? That's between two people. It's not hurting anybody. That's between them. So you can still hold those conservative viewpoints, or you can hold the full-on liberal viewpoints of marry any trans, whatever you want. That's not, the state doesn't have to be involved in that. That's not necessary. That's not important. That's not their role. Why would we grant that?
Right. Yeah. I mean, when I started to understand like how much the government actually dictates our lives, I started to really get a good grasp on what being a libertarian is. Because, like you said, most people will grant you that, yes, I enjoy being an individual. I like contributing whatever I am at my core to society, right? And people don't like to be interfered with. And this is why I think that, the gay agenda is what it is, and everything is starting to coalesce into this fight for social justice, and there's this huge level of victimhood because everybody feels like they want to be heard, and they feel like people that don't hear them or somehow, or don't agree with them, are somehow bigoted. And
sure.
And when you put when you offend somebody to their core like that, or when somebody feels like they have their life is being disrupted, they want someone to speak for them. They want somebody to advocate for them. So they choose the government Absolutely. To regulate it.
Right.
And as I try to tell people, like, the government is not meant, it was never meant to be in our lives that much. The only thing they were supposed to do is protect our life, liberty, and the pursuit of our happiness.
Right.
That's pretty much it. They weren't even meant to tax us. Like, that's what we went to war for in the beginning. Like, because, taxation without representation. And that's why, most libertarians, when you talk to them about taxation, they're going to be like, it's theft. You're stealing from me. Because it's like the threat of not paying taxes is a gun. Like, you're going to go to jail if you don't pay your taxes.
100%. Yeah. It's full on. It's no, any law, no matter how minor the infraction. So, like, you call the cops on somebody for playing music too loud. What you're doing is you're calling on a state actor to coerce with violence on your behalf. Like, you understand that it's probably just going to be a ticket, a minor inconvenience for the individual, but ultimately, if that individual doesn't comply 100%, the end result of that is violence. It is a gun. So, the second that you say, oh, well, if they're not doing something, call the cops, like, you're literally just saying, well, I grant that a state actor that is funded publicly can come out here and force my will upon this individual at the threat of a gun. That's the end result of any law. You know what I mean? And with taxes no less. You can say that taxation goes to all these wonderful programs, but if you rob somebody and you buy a gift for a kid, like, okay, sure, you've made somebody, you've given somebody happiness, but you've taken unjustly to grant that. I mean, that's not moral. You wouldn't just wave off somebody who robbed you because of what they ultimately did with the money being good. So yeah, it is theft, or it's, I mean, any number of different gray areas within theft. You can call it different things, but ultimately you're not. I mean, I didn't sign a social contract. That doesn't really exist. So when you're granting that, it's not something that you can put. Well, right here is where when you were born, you approved an endless number of tax codes, and every time it changes from whoever votes that and that change into power, you have to adhere to that from now to eternity, or you, like you said, it ends with a gun. I mean, it ends with violence.
Right. And that takes me to the whole police thing right now. I think people at this point they're trying to understand, like, why police are killing people, but honestly, the police are, and they're the fists of the government. Like, that's what they're meant to enforce laws, and that's technically what they're paid to do. The violence that they do inflict is honestly to protect our liberty and our values, but we're also supposed to do that. That's why you have the Second Amendment. We're able to defend our lives with whatever means that we need, and with guns being the aforementioned means.
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't know, man. What do you think about the police and their role?
So it's not easy, and it's not. I mean, if I was to go full on anarcho-capitalist utopia, it would be privatized, because as it is, the police are the lines between where the police are beholden to you. There's so many layers in there where you don't actually have any say. And if you look at any privatization that you do have, say you want a chicken sandwich, if you don't agree with the values of the founder owner of Chick-fil-A, you don't have to go to Chick-fil-A. You can go to KFC. You can go to Church's. You can go to Lee's. Lee's is obviously the best chicken place anyway. So you would go to Lee's, and you have those options. You don't have, and with government you have one option. You have one option. You have maybe the illusion of options within there, but it's ultimately all from one place. So with the current state of the police, the fact that you have to go out and protest that you don't want the police to take these violent actions, but you have no other means to stop them. You can't stop paying them. Like, you can't do that. That's what public services are. You're forced to pay into them, and then you have to make just to no end of changes, slow changes, incremental changes, and demand these things. But there's not like that. I'm not pretending protests don't help, but that's not an immediate change. If you don't like your home security provider, you cancel the service, you get a new provider. Like it's that easy. So
True.
the fact that we don't have these kinds of options from what is ultimately just, like you said, the fist of the state, that's the issue. We can talk endlessly about police militarization, inherent racism within the police. Like all these things are fine, but they're all symptoms of a larger disease. Like to borrow a term from Konkin, our enemy, the state. Like that's the core of it. So I think that this division amongst political groups, racial groups, cultural groups, to try to figure out where the issues are within the state, like it's the state. All of it is these several little symptoms that go up to the top, and that's the state. That's the ultimate issue. So you can't fix that when we're all divided on these separate, what's the most important symptom. Like, yeah, okay, all these symptoms are very important, but the disease is still the state. You know what I mean? That's ultimately the problem.
Yeah, and that you mentioned privatizing. That's one way to actually, I guess, defund the police would be to privatize it. And it will also probably get rid of some of the corruption that's prevalent.
Right.
Because people say the police department is like a crew; it does whatever it wants to do, right? And there is if police act as a gang, then what's really there to stop it? You know what I'm saying? Because they're backed by the government.
Right.
If
so backed by us, they're
backed by us.
We funded that, yeah. But they're backed by the government. You're right, but yeah.
I mean, if like say for instance, if somebody was to attack them though, and somebody were to attack the police, the local police directly, they still are able to call the government to come down and enforce them.
Right.
This is actually takes me to another point about privatization. Like as far as schools go, the school system is run by the government as well.
Yeah.
For the most part, but we can have private institutions that provide better education. However, what we're doing is we're dumping more and more money into the government and to our public system, which does not get any better.
Yeah.
If that were to change, and I think Trump is actually trying to do some things to change that, and Betsy DeVos is doing some things, because I'm being from the inner city, and just seeing how things go, it really is just getting worse. I was one of the smarter kids. I was able to get out and I was able to do certain things, but that's just because I had the mindset to do so. If you're not driven on that path, and you don't have a lot of the people to push you forward, you're not going to be able to break out of that system.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What do you think about actually just getting rid of the entire public school system and privatizing that, so that we actually have better choices to make as far as, and also if we're having better choices, we're going to things are going to be competitive and they're going to get better. It's just like
exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Just like having different cars. As cars went on, you had different manufacturers and cars got better.
It's I mean, we see it now with the private school systems. You do have choice, and there are varying degrees of price, varying degrees of success. You know that certain schools are going to provide a better outcome than others, but you make that choice. And I think the key argument against privatization of schools, or school choice as it's called, is that it's going to cost the individual, and that's completely accurate. And there are people who do have, at the moment, low income. They wouldn't be able to, at the current rates, send their children to a private school, and that's why they use public schooling. But these people are already paying into these public schools. I mean, these people are paying for these poor educations as it is. And when you introduce more competition to a market, the prices invariably go down. Like, that's just how free markets work. If you introduce to a small town, you introduce several gas stations. Like, that's a great example, because gases are a different price range. But if you introduce several hardware stores, like you have a market where there are hardware stores that are going to have to match each other's market. So sure, you may go to the ones that's more expensive because they have better tools, but you're going to have other options there, and they're all going to have to match out. At some point, you're going to have lower prices. So if you introduce more school choice, you introduce more options to these parents, or different, like, as it is, they are anchored down to where they live. That's what the school has to. That's the school system they have to go to. And you if you allow them to go to different schools, to better schools, there are parents that are able to and would send their children to other schools if that was allowed. But as it's regulated to the point where the school system is just, you're stuck there. And like you said, if they don't have that drive personally, or they don't have the resources around them to push them to the point of getting out of whatever detrimental situation that they're in, that's just going to increase. That's going to become a generational thing. And we see that. Like, that's, like you said, that's something that does repeat itself generationally. And it's continuing to dump money into the system that's causing these issues makes no sense. That's not, it's not even about trying to reform. I mean, we've been given more and more and more to these systems that are producing less and less and less. So yeah, I think that's a very important thing. I don't think it's something that can be done immediately. I mean, I don't think you can snap your fingers and just make it a privatization of schools, but to allow incremental steps toward that freedom is super important. I mean, that's the only way we see change, true change, through generational issues. Like, these things have, like you said, been going on for a while. Inner cities, people that are just stuck in one bad situation, give them options. What's the downside to having options? I mean, there's always going to be some possible danger and threat to freedom, but without that threat, there's no actual freedom. There's just not. So you have to grant that to these people. You can't say you care about these lower income, lower class people and then not give them choices. That doesn't make any sense to me.
I totally agree. And I think the voucher system that they're trying to institute, I believe that's one way to combat some of these frustrating and very poor, school choices, and with also with these teachers having these unions. They can't really be fired if they're poor teachers, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's a system that really needs to be overhauled as well.
Yeah.
I do remember growing up, and my school had a choice within it where the smarter children they were kind of separated and put into different classes. I think a lot of school systems have that, but that being in that in those special classes, it allowed me to. If it wasn't for that, I don't even think I would have thought about going to college. I'd have probably went to to the military. Actually, cool story. I didn't know where I was supposed to go or what I was supposed to do after I graduated. I had actually enlisted in the Marines.
Oh wow!
So, I was getting ready to ship out. A week before I shipped out, my high school coach, my high school football coach, he got me an interview with this guy, one of the head coaches at McMurray College, which was in Jacksonville, Illinois. So I ended up getting the scholarship there. I got an art scholarship there, plus I got to play football. And lo and behold, there's like a there's a stipulation in your enlisting where if you get a scholarship, you can de-enlist. So
Okay.
I was actually released so that I can go ahead and go to college.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was very, very weird and fortuitous that that I got that chance. However, even thinking now, I don't know if I had that same choice again. I might actually choose the Marines. To be perfectly honest.
Yeah, hindsight, man. But that's good. I mean, that's amazing. The core of that, though, is that somebody that didn't have to cared. The football coach, you said,
Yep.
took time to make sure that you were doing what was best for you, and that's the core of that. And the voluntary assistance like that. It's different when you're in a system that you just like the kids are numbers. You push them in and out. Like there are people in there though that do care. I mean, some of my best teachers. I went to a private and public school growing up, and some of my best teachers were honestly in the public school. I not the best education, but the best individuals were in the public school, which was interesting. But that's an individual thing. Like those people are important regardless of the shape of the industry they're in. Like those people are going to be those kinds of people. They're going to be helpers. They're going to be voluntary assistants to kids that they see potential in,
Right.
and even the ones that they don't think are going to necessarily succeed the path they're on. Maybe they don't see potential. They're going to try to find that potential. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, and I did have a lot of people that actually cared about me, which once again it was crucial. Looking back, I had a great art teacher. I had really good instructors that they helped me bring out some of the potential that I held.
Yeah.
And, it's up to us to do the rest. But
I think we met at the call center job, and that was the first thing. I'm like, man, you got some good drawings. What's going on over here? Like going over to your desk and just looking at your drawings. And that's kind of how we started talking.
Mm-hmm.
And potential beyond just the basics for sure.
Yeah, man. If you like people are allowed to pursue their best selves. In the just the freest manner.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is at the core of what it is to be American, really.
Absolutely.
And I don't really have any. The only problems I've had with just dealing with my life is understanding how much my childhood actually really impacts who I am now.
Mm-hmm.
You deal with those consequences, and you take your chances, and life is just an adventure after that. So like when you and I met, I was at a point where I had just come off a contract with the military. And
Okay.
I've been working in a call center there. I was making more than what we were getting paid, much more than what we were getting paid there. But I learned a lot more working at that job than I did anywhere else. So it was times when I was thinking, like, after I left, I wanted to come back. And I had talked to our former supervisor a few times, and she actually asked me to come back. She actually asked me to come back. She had given me a pay increase if I wanted to come back. But ultimately, I decided to stay, and that's where things have gone thus far. But that's what's good about having, making these choices and having the opportunities that we do in this country. As individuals, we don't have to worry about this whole collectivist thing like many other people in various countries like Venezuela had to deal with. We are we are really working out this entire American experiment.
Right.
And I feel, unlike some other people that are black, I feel like I'm really a part of this country. I feel like this country is mine. I feel as if I contribute. I don't buy into this systemic racism thing. I don't buy into the idea that white people or white supremacy exists. I don't buy into the idea of equality either. I think that equality is just an illusion. It's something that people say to be kind, but in reality, most people don't have equality. Equality doesn't really exist. It's just people are going to be different. Was it Thomas Sowell that said you're not even? He said that you're not even equal to yourself on different days.
To yourself, yeah.
So
I think and I won't speak to the racial portion of that. I'll leave that to you because you're far more articulated than I am. But the concept of equality, I believe that from a human level. I believe that everyone is equal as a human. But if we're talking about what they do, I mean, we know that they're not that doesn't exist. Equality doesn't exist because we see people that do achieve, and we cheer that on because the American society is about individualism at its core. We cheer that on. Like, I want you to be better than me. Like, I want these people to do more and more and to be better than themselves. I mean, like you said, on a different day, I don't want the equality of outcome because I want everyone to try to achieve. If you equate wanting something other than equality of outcome to being somehow holding people down, then every time you learn something, you're essentially holding somebody else down. If that's the way you look at it, if you look at yourself as saying, well, if anybody is above another intellectually, physically, what they can and can't do, and if you think that's automatically going to be some kind of a negative thing and that it's going to push the other person down, then if you learn a skill, you're pushing people down. And that's not how that works. Like, you learn a skill to better yourself. And we also, I mean, there's nothing that I sat there and looked at in other people and seeing them achieve and thought, oh, well, I guess I'll stop trying because they already achieved. I mean, that's not how that works. You grow up with heroes for a reason. You grow up with heroes wanting to achieve that. You don't grow up with heroes saying, I hate that person for achieving more than me. Right. If you do, it's a very limiting mindset on yourself. Like, you're limiting yourself doing that. So yeah, I believe in equality of humanity for sure, but equality of outcome, nobody believes that. If you talk to people on a personal level and you don't get into the politics of it, you just talk with them, they don't believe that. They believe that they're better than you sometimes. I mean, if people on the left are like, oh, no, I'm better. Well, if you think you're better than me because you have a very specific political leaning, well, then you don't believe in equality of outcome. And inherently, you believe that individuals can be better than other individuals. So how can you say both those things at the same time? Like, I think we should all try to achieve the most we can for ourselves and voluntarily assist anyone else we can in having them achieve the most they can for themselves. Like, that's how that works. That's how we move forward. That's how we progress, if you will.
I totally agree because people can see themselves achieve. They can see where they started and where they are now.
Right.
And to have that sense of accomplishment is really inherent to the human life, to humanity on a whole.
Yeah, it provides that dopamine hit. Just seeing yourself getting better than you were is like that's a drug in and of itself. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and just like you, like when I met you, how much weight have you lost?
I think I was probably pushing 350 or more at one point, and so I definitely dropped. I dropped around 100, 150 maybe at one point. And then I started going to the gym, bulking up. But yeah, I mean, I was just, until I was 30, I just assumed that I would always just be huge. And it took just a full-on mindset change of that everything I was doing, I had to attribute to my own choices and reverse the ones that were negative.
Amen.
And that's what it is. I stopped blaming other people. I stopped blaming other things just in general, and I had to make the decision myself. So yeah, I think everyone that's and it's not a guarantee. There's not a guarantee, but like, what's the downside to that? You know, what's the downside to trying to better yourself?
I totally agree, and I did much of the same thing. And this is really at the core of me why I believe that people can do whatever they want, and that's why I don't buy into the idea that I'm oppressed, because I was able to change certain aspects of my life depending on how much effort I put into it.
Yeah.
You know, when I was living in DC, and I was living with my ex, and we broke up, and it was devastating. And so I came back to Illinois and stayed with my mother. And instead of feeling sorry for myself, I picked myself up. At that point, I was like 280 something pounds, and or close to it. I picked myself up, man. I changed my diet. Stopped eating. I stopped eating meat for a while. And I just started running like every day.
Wow, nice.
It took me 3 months, man, but I dropped like 75 pounds, bro.
Wow.
I got, actually, it might have been more than that, because at my lowest, at that point that year, I went from around 280 to 193. So, you know what I'm saying? That was insane. And I was so driven, and I saw myself like I would envision myself every night. I would visualize like how I wanted to look,
right.
and I got to that.
Yeah,
I got to the point where I felt amazing, and I felt like I can do anything, and there was nothing stopping me, nothing in front of me that could hold me back. Now I've deviated from that course here and there. You know, I'm back on track right now, but that situation right there told me, and continues to inform me, that the only impression and the only enemy that we will ever face is ourselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the fact that, I mean, people will say, "Oh, you know, I used to do that, but I fell off." You can do that though. That's the most important thing. You understand your potential at that point, and that you can overcome any of the other obstacles that are in your way. Like, the obstacle is the way. Like, that's what you have to face to achieve what you want to achieve. And yeah, like you said, this quarantine thing got to me too, but it's not the quarantine, it's me. I made choices during quarantine. Yeah, the gym shut down. Yeah, okay, so I guess I'll start eating this and eating that again. But those are still my choices. Like, just because I couldn't go to the gym doesn't mean I had to start eating poorly. I mean, like, those are my choices. You can't blame everything that happens to you on the external factors. You have to understand that you do have autonomy. You do have the choices to make. And like I said, once you've hit that at some point, and you realize that you have that in you, the potential to make those choices, like you said, you feel like there's nothing you can't do. And there were people that helped you out, but they helped you along the way. But you had to make that walk on your own. Like, you had to make that path, and that journey was yours to make, and you did that. You can people are always there to help, and that's super important, obviously, but you have to be the one that does it ultimately.
Absolutely, man. And if I would like to think that, like, I have had a difficult life up until a certain point. I grew up hard. I had a lot of things going against me. You know, my mother, my father wasn't there with me all the time. I had a stepfather, but he wasn't there that much either. Most of my family was matriarchal.
Oh, okay.
So on both sides, like even my father's side, like his father was killed long before I was born. So when you have factors like that, it's kind of hard to get beyond it. But people have and will continue to. As long as they have the information and they have the wherewithal and fortitude to push forward. I don't think having a single parent is like a death sentence for everyone, but it does make it difficult to succeed. It does make it very hard. That's why I never wanted to ever put my daughter through something like that. But she's here. She didn't ask to be here. I'm here to take care of her. I want to make sure that she has the best life that she has. I didn't have her out of wedlock, so I don't want anybody thinking that. Like my daughter was born to two loving parents that loved each other at the time she was conceived. It was I had a difficult marriage. A lot of things happened. Blah blah blah. But in the end, she's here. I'm here. I'm here to make things better for her.
You're a good man. I mean, that's what it's about, man. No situation is perfect. We can look at factors and say these factors contribute to a better situation, and that's absolutely true for anything. But you always have to make the best out of what you have, and it sounds like you're doing that for sure. And I was the same way. My parents were divorced when I was 10, so I grew up in initially in a 2-parent household, and that was great. Then I was raised by my mother, and that was great too. But it's not. There are benefits and definitely benefits to having 2 parents, to having that dynamic. But like you said, man, you got to do what you got to do with that. You got to make sure that the upbringing is the best that it can be, because you have to let eventually that person has to make their own decisions. Yes. And that's where it really starts. Like it starts when they're children, but it really, like, their life continues and really begins when they're making their own decisions. You have to prepare them as best you can for that.
Exactly. As far as libertarianism goes, what are some of your favorite readings or your favorite books that have kept you informed on your values and how to move forward?
Sure. Actually, I'm in the middle of the New Libertarian Manifesto by Konkin. This is a really good one because it kind of breaks apart different previous arguments, the history of the Libertarian Party, the Libertarian ideals in general, the philosophy of it, and then I picked up Choice. This is a really good book. It kind of breaks apart the economics of a free market, of just understanding, because you can apply free market economics to everything. Essentially, you can apply it to life in general. You can apply it to just interactions between people. Those are really good ones to start with. It's as far as the concept of like individualism, Ayn Rand had an early book called Anthem that was a work of fiction, but it's a very good look at a society that has stripped away individualism and what that causes, the damage that causes to human psyches, to human innovation, to progress. Mm-hmm. That's a really good one. I mean, Michael Malice always suggests that as the first Ayn Rand book as well that you should read. But that's Michael a good Malice. One. That's a good one to start with, because it's a fairly short book. But those are some good ones. That's the Libertarian Manifesto is good to get a general idea of what the concepts are of libertarianism. Choice is a good one to understand. Choices by Robert P. Murphy. It's a good one to understand free market economics from a historical and possible standpoints. What we can do with it. And then Anthem is a really good one just to understand on a human level what occurs when you stifle individualism, when you stifle freedom and choice generally. So those are probably 3 good ones to start with.
Cool. And I haven't read either of those. A lot of what I've been reading lately is basically Stoicism. Like I've been looking at the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah.
And just kind of going through different ideas about how to deal with people anger, situations that come upon you, unsuspectingly.
Mm-hmm.
It's for me, that's helped me just understand like how you have the choice to respond to things in any way that you want. However, you have to realize that it is your choice.
Absolutely.
Whatever drives your response, you have to own it.
Yeah.
You can't blame it on anybody else.
For sure, that's really important. I had The Daily Stoic was a book that I had with me when I traveled. That's just, you pick it up every day. There's a quote, a Stoic quote in there, and then it kind of breaks down that quote. That's a really good one, just because that gets you bite-sized concepts of Stoicism.
I subscribe to that, actually, the Daily Stoic.
They do good. Yeah, they do good posts. There's also a book called How to Think Like a Roman Emperor by Donald Robertson. I did an audio book, and he kind of breaks apart the philosophy of Stoicism, specifically Marcus Aurelius, in his writings, and helps you apply it to your life more so. It's like you can call it a self-help book, but it's not cheesy. It's very much just straightforward Stoicism and then application of Stoicism. So that's a really good one too. That's by Donald Robertson, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor. I did that on. Yeah, it's really good. That's like I have some friends who are like far from me in political wise. So Stoicism doesn't apply to politics directly, but I've suggested both of those things to him. Like I actually bought him a copy of the Daily Stoic to help him, and I suggested How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, because that's just, it's invaluable, man. It's so good. I think you should grab that too. Just even if it's just something you sit down and listen to for 30 minutes at a time on Audible or something. That's a really good book.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I take every suggestion. I take all of it to heart, because
dude. I know my Amazon cart is full of like 30 books. I'm like, I can't order all these at once, so every now and then I'll order a book. Yeah.
Exactly, and it's amazing like how much I've learned just from various people over the years, and you take these things. It's almost like it's an adventure within an adventure, because you really you start to see that everybody plays their part.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is like, they might have a small influence, but it might be really huge to you in the long run, because you may take that little bit and expand upon it. So it's really amazing. I remember there was a post that you had on Facebook one day, and you were talking about the movie They Live. And I found it so interesting, because that's one of my favorite movies.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think about, or better yet, what are some of your favorite post-apocalyptic movies that kind of show you the breakdown of society over a long run?
That's a good one. Wow, I'm gonna try not to just name John Carpenter movies here, because I love everything John Carpenter did. But They Live is a really interesting one, because it was written, I believe, as a critique of capitalism initially. But if you watch it, and which is fine, not that capitalism isn't without critiques, mm-hmm. but it's a critique of society and how susceptible we are to just whatever we're being told by whoever we deem authoritative is like, okay, well, that's obviously what we're going to do now. And that's a really good one, because it really allows you to, it plays out. It's a silly movie, but it plays out with so many themes that are just happening in society. That's a really good one. I gotta say Escape from New York is really cool, because that's a very good look at cool. You essentially created a prison city, because we have all these non-violent offenders thrown in with all these violent offenders, and we treat them the same. And that's kind of a good critique of the current prison system. Like, why are we throwing people in prison for their lives for owning a plant next to the dude who killed 5 people? Obviously I'm exaggerating a bit, but like that's what it is. That's Escape from New York is essentially like, well, there's so many felons at this point. We just kind of categorize them all together as being bad, and we throw them in this city because that's. I mean, at what point is that not going to be the case if we continue down this path of more and more and more laws and throwing people away for life for non-violent offenses, like things that aren't like who's the victim in you sitting in your house getting high? There's no victim to that. Like that's something you should be thrown in prison for, next to the dude next to a pedophile, or next to a murderer. Like those are violent, absolute, terrible people, and you're throwing them in there with the dude who smoked weed in his apartment, or sold some weed to his buddy. Like that's so. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm just kind of harping on John Carpenter movies. I love John Carpenter, but those are you brought up They Live, and now I'm just kind of in that mindset. But yeah, I think those are some good ones. And then obviously, because we all know AOC is correct, Waterworld is a great because that's the most important thing right now is.
Look at Waterworld, dude. Yeah, I think one of the ones that I liked the most, that really said a lot to me, was Equilibrium. You seen that?
That's a good. Oh yeah, man, I love Equilibrium. Yeah.
Yeah. When I first saw that, I was trying to really. I got into the action part of it, but as I watched it over and over again,
Gun Kata.
That was sick.
Awesome. Yeah.
When I started thinking about like the idea that they were destroying art, destroying thoughts, and basically crushing ideas. And when you break it all down, these ideas are what really make us human.
Exactly.
The driving force behind us being individuals is because we have these different thoughts, and we're able to convey them to one another. We relate to one another in various ways, and this is what makes one man great and another man not so great.
Right.
And it's the idea that okay, you're making everyone equal once again, and they're trying to, you got to take a pill to basically curtail your thoughts, your inspirations.
Basic human, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, these are basic human emotions, and just basic to our humanity. That's what makes us who we are. When you're trying to crush it, you find that people will rebel in the most wondrous ways, and it's something that the longer I thought about, it was like, yo, you cannot. No one can ever take away who you are. If they do, it's the end of humanity. We can't. We cease to be human once we can express our individuality.
I think one of the most interesting things about the movie is that it works. Like, you see an efficient society, but to what cost? Like, that's what. If you simply look at every action or every state overreach as saying, well, it worked. Well, okay, maybe it worked to the end that you wanted to meet, but what's the cost in that? With Equilibrium, like, I mean, this is a fun action movie, but at the end of the day, it's a critique on the concept of stifling humanity for the greater good. And like I said, their society was efficient and it functioned, and there was no crime within those walls that they built of that perfect society. But that's not living. That's not humanity. Like, you have to have the choice. And like Clockwork Orange is a really great one for that. Like, was he cured? You know what I mean? Like, that's not. He can't make choices. I mean, depending on the ending, but you can't make choices. Are you human? Like, what's the purpose? What's the actual outcome that you're seeking? Is it cattle, or is it living? You're
just a shadow, basically.
Right.
Yeah. There's another movie, or it's actually a short story developed from God, what is his name? Anyway, Kurt Vonnegut. Yeah, Kurt Vonnegut.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a short story called Harrison Bergeron, and
Okay.
I actually did a short video on that. But Harrison Bergeron, in the story, everyone has to wear a handicap, and the smarter or greater that you are, the heavier the handicap, right?
Yeah.
So if you were really beautiful, you have to wear a mask. If you were really smart, you have to have these radio transmitters in your ear that constantly interrupted your thoughts. So basically, you were basically made equal with everyone else.
Right.
So in the book, Harrison Bergeron is like he's probably the greatest human that was ever born, and he was so great they had to chain him up. He had all this stuff on him. He was like bogged down with handicaps. Like he had a mask, huge, like heavy weights on him. He's like 7 feet tall, immensely smart. So he eventually breaks his bonds, and he just goes on like a rampage. So he goes to this studio where this girl is dancing, and it's like a ballet dance, and she has her handicaps on too, because she's really beautiful. But anyway, he finds her and he takes her as his queen, and takes off all the handicaps, and they're like dancing, and they're dancing so great, they start floating in the air. And anyway, there's this person called the handicapper general. It's a woman, mind you. She comes in, blasts him out of the air with a gun. Boom. That's it. That's the end of the book or the story. But basically, it's just saying that, you know, in society, no matter how great you may be, there's always going to be somebody trying to tear you down, trying to destroy your dreams and your aspirations and your inspirations.
Yeah. And no matter how far you've already been torn down, you can overcome those. Like
Yes.
That's absolutely, yeah. I haven't actually read that, but I know all that from your video on it. It was a really good video on that. But yeah, that's I need to read more Kurt Vonnegut in general. But no, that's true. Like there's always going to be somebody that tries to stifle you, and if we grant that control, then that's the end of that. Like you ultimately, as in there, if we grant someone else that power over us, they're going to overcome. So yeah, like breaking out of the chain. That's a really good analogy for that.
Yeah. So and Fight Club, of course. Fight Club made me rethink, like getting all this shit. Like, how much stuff do you have? What does it mean? I think actually Fight Club was probably like a book that was it? Would you say it was more about collectivism? Would you say
it was a good critique on that? It was a good critique on materialism in and of itself to no end as well, and having that emptiness of a human that has the mystique of having so much, having that illusion of having so much, and just finding what's core. Because it's not inherently bad to have things, but when you're using those things in place of principles or ideals or just living in general, like that's where you're doing yourself a disservice, and that's where you're doing anyone around you a disservice as well.
Exactly, and that's true. I was like, I don't know if people really. I'm sure a lot of people analyze these movies and they think deeply about them, the books as well. I don't know. I find a lot of inspiration in art, especially the visual media. So I always try to pick and choose what I'm watching and try not to waste my time with garbage. But,
sometimes garbage is fun though, man. Like Johnny Mnemonic is a lot of fun. Or like Hackers.
Johnny Mnemonic was pretty fun, man. I enjoyed
those. Those are fun. Yeah.
I enjoyed that movie, man. It's any movie, almost any movie with Keanu Reeves, I can just sit there and enjoy, man. It's It's,
You don't have to call it art, but it's fun.
yeah, you don't have to call it art, but it is fun. Look, man, I'm gonna wrap this up. But where can people go find you at, man? On social media?
I post on social media as at Captain Longbeard on Instagram. That's pretty much it. I don't do too much political posting. It's mostly just me. But it's I don't really have an outlet for this kind of stuff. So this is nice to be able to do this, to chat with you. I really appreciate the opportunity because I think we should do this more often. We can do current events. We can do, this is fun. We don't have to get super in depth. Just a fun chat. I think this is important because I don't really have too many people around me that are not tired of hearing me harp on these things. So and from a loving place, but it's I also want to give them a break. So I think this is a really good outlet for this as well. But yeah, dude, just at Captain Longbeard on Instagram. I don't post too much political stuff there, but that's pretty much all I'm at.
Cool. Anyway, go ahead and follow him. It's Captain Longbeard on Instagram. I'm on Instagram as well, _irregularman. I don't really post a lot of political stuff either, but every now and then I might say a few things, but I try to keep it less intense because people try to attack you depending on what your political beliefs are, especially if you're on the right a little bit.
Yeah.
So I don't.
Yeah, you got to stay in that Overton window, man. You can't stray from that.
Oh my God.
You can't stray from the 3x5 card of acceptable opinions, as Tom Wood says.
Yeah, I've been called racist like 3 or 4 times this week, and I'm like, dude, I'm racist, really? Of all people, I'm racist. It was pretty funny fielding those comments about me being racist, man. I'm like, okay, look, this is what I meant. Please don't take it too far. I don't think it was racist to say that, okay? But it is what it is, man.
You stray from that narrative, man, you're gonna get hit no matter what. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. I learned my lesson. I usually don't.
You can't get into those trolls. You can't go back and forth with those trolls too much. It'll consume you, dude. It'll consume you. It's fun, but it'll consume you.
It will. I was thinking to myself like this, and that's one of the reasons why I don't go on social media a whole lot, and I don't engage people, no matter what they say, because I know if it makes me feel a certain way, I'm not gonna say anything about it. It's one guy that I have on my Instagram. He's a lefty, a huge lefty. Like, he hates Trump. And, I see him posting various things. I'm like, man, this guy is off the wall. But he's funny, too. He's got a lot of funny things that he posts, too. So, I don't engage with the other stuff. But, I like to laugh at his posts. So,
sure.
I haven't deleted them or anything like that. But yeah, Nathan, man, this has been a pleasure, dude. I always enjoy talking to you, whether it's here or in person. Next time I'm in town, man, have a couple cigars, a couple drinks, and
absolutely, man. Yeah,
we chew the fat. I probably will be there next month sometime, or actually, it is already August, so I'll be there sometime. I'm gonna take a few days off so I can clear my head here. It's rough sometimes when you're a parent and you don't really have like a huge outlet. Just work and your kid. You know what I mean? So
yeah, you got to realign yourself, man. Yeah.
Yep. And it's with me going hiking and taking these different ventures, just going around to different places, man, within this state, is really, man, it just gives me a lot of clarity. So I'm enjoying it.
Good. Yeah, that's important. That's really important.
Yeah, man. But anyway, man, I am the Black Lex, and my platform is Irregular Man. It's always been about men finding themselves, achieving the best of themselves, and also combating this strange social push to silence us. Once again, man, thank you, bro.
You do good work. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
You're quite welcome, man. Have a good one.
You too. Take care.
All right, take care.